I've got a little bit of slides, but mostly we will do a live demo, let's say, with how to write the unit tests. So I'm Betim Bea from Albania, and I've been working with the business application since June 2018. And for the last year, a little bit more, I've been acting as an independent contractor. And I've been working full-time, let's say, as a full-stack .NET developer since May of 2015. And before that, I was studying, and I started working with project-based works because of the studies. So it was part-time since 2003. And I've started with Visual Basic 6, active server pages, pre.NET, and JavaScript. So this is where I started. Now I am more focused on business applications, and that's what we are going to talk about today. No? So my main focus is to deliver with quality and with confidence. So the test-driven development is the main let's say main focus if you want to deliver with confidence, because you can create a lot of tests which help, let's say, but we will talk about that a little bit later. And then after I will start with a live demo. I will create the plugin project. I will create the test for that plugin, and I will create a custom workflow action project, then create the test for that too. And in the end, I will create a project with a package that I wrote in MS Build, let's say, which auto-generates the coverage using report generator and other libraries. But the thing is that it's zero configuration. No? You install the package and then you get the unit test coverage report. So test-driven development. The first thing is the why. No, you have to deliver with more confidence. So you have to test. You can raise your hand if you ever deploy the plugin and then you got another reference exception. No, me. And then to avoid some of the most common bugs, let's say, you can write some tests, and then you can write your most of the requirements can be easily mapped to unit test, so you can validate and you can measure if those requirements are let's say fulfilled each time. Even you are protected from regressions, because most of the time you get new requirements and you change some code that you wrote 6 months ago, and then there is a huge risk to do some regressions on the previous requirements, which is something that unit tests help a lot with. Then tests can be run continuously in an integration pipeline. So you can make sure that each time you build with the continuous integration, every test is run and you still meet those requirements. And as I wrote there, it's the best type of documentation for us developers, because usually most of the developers don't like writing documentation. So at least you can write the tests, and it's a big start, let's say. Then in the Dynamics world, it's a little bit difficult, because it was at least a little bit difficult, because you have to, when you have dependencies which are calls to APIs or databases, you need to replace those dependencies with something more lightweight and with something that responds, let's say, to your use case, because you want to test specific use cases on your plugin or on your code. So you separate it in small units and you test each unit locally. And 7 years ago, Jordi created the FakeXrmEasy library, which, as I wrote there, to the rescue, because it really helps a lot with ensuring quality. And what I usually do, and I think everyone should do when we use open source libraries, because FakeXrmEasy is open source, is we should somehow give something back to the creators, no? And it shouldn't be money, no? It can be money, but it has to be at least some thank yous. And this is what I usually do. No, from time to time I write to the creators, and I wrote this message to Jordi, and there's the date too. So I thanked him in private. It was not in public. I usually do it in public too. When FakeXrmEasy helps me from some regressions, for example, I tweet about it. So this is something I ask everyone to do, because it's free, no? But it means a lot to the creators, and it means a lot to me too, because other than sending thank yous, I'm helping with maintaining the library and giving a hand to Jordi. And this is from the FakeXrm repository. I'm the second contributor, and I have a lot more of pull requests to be approved. And Jordi will talk about that later on. So I will not talk too much about the theory or the ideas behind that, but I'm going to go straight ahead in a demo so we can see how easy it is to set up everything and to start coding. So let me just open Visual Studio. And I did something. Okay, I have to do with some requirements that I just put on Microsoft to do. So what we need to do now, we want to create a project for our plugins, so we can, let's say, fulfill those requirements in our Dataverse implementation. So I'll go ahead and create a new project. If you follow me on GitHub, let's say, I've created a lot of different types of projects, and one of the projects is the templates for dynamics. So I'm going to use the template to create the plugin. I'm going to call the solution Dataverse Summit. And I'm just going to call my project without a number, Albanian XRM plugins. I'm using the Albanian XRM nickname, let's say, in the open source world. So I'll go ahead and just create my project. So what the template does is it creates a project for the plugins, and it has already referenced the SDK for the dynamics, and that has already set to false, let's say, the copy local, and has already signed the assembly, so it's ready to be published in the dynamics, almost, because we have to write the plugin. And it has a plugin base which helps a lot to maintain this a small code for your plugins, because most of the logic is being reused. No? So what I want to create for this is some plugins to validate the data when we create accounts. So we can validate fulfill these requirements. So the accounts should have a name and must have the primary name, primary contact specified. All these requirements will be validated or enforced in our plugins. So I will use the early bound for the data model because it helps a lot with unit testing and it helps a lot with writing your code with confidence. During my presentation, I will not open, not even once, my Dynamics instance. So just to show you how easy it is. The data model, I want to copy it from from here, because I already have something prepared. But we can generate, I copied it, but we can generate our early bound models with tools that we can find on XRM Toolbox. No, I've created an alternative, let's say, to early bound generator, but I did that only because I wanted to experiment something and to implement something way faster. Because one of the main problems that I had in a project was that we had tables with more than 300 columns. And we had a lot of those, but we were using only 10 to 20 columns in our plugin logic. So we were limited to not using the early bound because we had a lot of code that was being generated that we didn't need. And it has like this option here, cache metadata, that uses the metadata that I have in XRM Toolbox to generate the model. So if I click generate, it will finish like in an instant. And there are other options too that early bound generator doesn't have. For example, I don't usually use the service context to write my queries. So I did an option to remove the property changed events, because the only need for the use for those is to use the link you driver, no, for the service context. Since I don't need those, I can remove them from my generated code, and it is a little bit faster and smaller in size. So this is what data I generated. I selected only a subset, so it's only 360 lines of code. And this is the configuration that I saved for what selection I did in my early bound for Albanian early bound. So let's go ahead. I will use some structure to my plugins, but it's not the standard that I use usually. It's only something that I use to make the demos, because the structure that I use usually depends on the project. Most of the projects I worked on were already started, so I had to adapt. And I only change things when those are wrong. So we have to write some account plugins, and we want to write some logic on our create message. And we will start with the validation. So I'm going to create a pre-validation folder. And I'm going to create a plugin. I'm going to call it ensure has contact, but it's not in the naming convention that I use usually, as I said before. So usually I like to change the namespace so it is shorter and it gives a little bit of meaning, because I'm not interested in what assembly my plugins are, but I like to use the namespace to specify which plugin I'm acting on. I have to make this public, and I have to extend the plugin base. You get a pretty similar template with a new, let's say, feature of the CLI of Power Apps, no? When you write pack init, plugin init, sorry. But it doesn't sign your assembly, and I've created this template before that, so it's the one that I use, but it works like any other template. And I will leave this in this way, and now I will go and implement our test. So I'm going to add a folder here, test, and I will add a test project for this plugin. So new project. It's a simple test project. Is a simple class library, and we said plugins. It's best to use the convention like tests, for example, for your test projects. You can use anything you want, but if you use tests in the package that I will show later, it is it auto configures your test coverage. So, but it's configurable. If you use another convention that doesn't match with the one that I implemented with the zero configuration, you can override that and specify your test name. So what we need to do in our test project, we need to install FakeXrmEasy as a NuGet package, FakeXrmEasy. It has several packages. Since I am creating a plugin for the online version of Dataverse, I have to use the version 9. If you want to create a plugin for an on-premise version for 365, there is a package even for that to test your plugins. Or if it's even, let's say, older, then you can find packages for each version of the CRM. So I'm going to install this. And I will use XUnit as a test framework, but it's not opinionated in that FakeXrmEasy. You can use whatever framework you're confident with. And I will use XUnit for two reasons, because the tests in FakeXrmEasy are written with XUnit, and because the package that I created for the coverage uses XUnit for the zero configuration. Otherwise, you have to do something else. So XUnit. And install this. And XUnit runner. I'm going to reference my plugins, let's say, project in my test project. And we can start writing the tests for our plugins. If you want to, let's say, upgrade easily in the new version of FakeXrmEasy, which Jordi will talk about, we need to use some test base class, so it will be easier. I will copy it from another file. So I'll just rename this in FakeXrmEasy tests base. I have a capital A. Okay, yes, and I'll just copy and paste this. So the idea is that you create a test base for the things that you use most in your tests. So it's easier to and cleaner, let's say, so you don't have to instantiate your fake context every time for the FakeXrmEasy tests. And I need at this point, I still don't have any tests written in my test library. So in my test project, I will go ahead and create a similar structure to what I created for my plugins. So we have, it's easier to navigate, let's say. So I need to match the name of the plugin that I'm testing just as a convention, but it's not a requirement. I add tests, let's say. So this has to be public, so it can be executed. And then, as we said before, we need to specify the test base. So I will clean up the namespace because otherwise it's a little bit longer. And I will rename. I will make this extend the test base. So FakeXrmEasy test base. And in XUnit to write a test, you just mark some public method with fact. So in XUnit. So this is public void. So what was our first requirement? Let's say we can go ahead and write a test that verifies that all accounts to be created must have a primary contact. So I'll go ahead and create this method. I will call this method account would have primary contact. So I have my test, and to do test-driven development, we should use the green light, red light, no? Nothing related to series. And my test is passing because it doesn't do anything, no? But I have written a test. What we need to do now is to call this, let's say we need to call this plugin so we can make sure that we validate what was our requirement. And to do this, we can try and use our plugin context, so we can just let's start this way. So this is our fake context, the FakeXrmEasy, and what we want to do is execute a plugin with, And we need to specify which plugin ensure has contact. And we can, I'm using the shortcuts to fill the usings. So this way we are executing our plugin. I haven't modified the default context, let's say, of the execution. But what we can do right now is run our test, and we can see that the test should fail. And it fails because it says it's not implemented, because that's what we had in our project. And so let's go ahead and try and implement something about this plugin. So what I like to do usually is use the constants for each message that I want to show from my plugin. So in the body of my plugin, in the execute method, I have almost 0 literal strings. And you will see the reason for that in a minute. So this will be the error message. Primary contact, okay. So this will be my error message, and instead of throwing this, I will throw a new invalid plugin execution. Okay. Exception. And I will throw this. So if I run my test right now, it is failing, but it is failing because I haven't written any test. No, I'm throwing the right exception, but I'm not asserting anything in my plugin. So to do that, I will record this exception. So I will create a variable to save it. And this is what XUnit gives you. So you can execute this function in a lambda expression, and it records the thrown exception. And in my test, I want to assert my exception to be not null, because I'm expecting something to be thrown. And I want to assert that the type of this to be invalid. Execution. And what I'm expecting is that it should have a primary contact. So now we can understand why I like to have my messages in my plugin, so I can reuse it like this. So exception. This way I have two benefits. No, I don't have to write the same text. If it is a long text, then it's a little bit difficult to write the same one. Takes more time. And the other benefit is that if I need to slightly change my text, my output text, then all the tests that don't exactly depend on what is written in that text, but that need to validate that something is thrown or something is returned, keep passing because we are changing the test with the text. So if I run my test now, it should pass. We had another requirement. The other requirement was that all accounts should have a name. So we can write another test about that. Okay. And as before, I'm going to create. I'm going to go a little bit a step further because we have to. I didn't specify the account here. No, we haven't implemented the logic in the plugin yet. We just are throwing that all accounts must have contact. So I will go ahead and write another test, but I will specify the context. So the target entity, the target record that it's acting, the plugin is acting on. And let me just create a new account equals. And I'm using the early bound, so it's a little bit easier. I don't need to open my Dataverse I don't need to know by memory each column because I have a lot of help from the compiler. And so this is my account. What I need to do now is like I can create, let's say, even a primary contact. I can specify it. I didn't put a comma here. Primary contact ID and create a new entity. So I'm going to use the entity logical name, and I'm just going to use a random identifier for our contact because it's not part of our test. Now what I need to do is to specify the target. So I'm going to generate, let's say, a default context for our plugin. And this is something that FakeXrmEasy helps us with. And I'm going to specify our input parameters. So we can use our target, and in my plugin base, I have constant for the target already prepared because it's one of the most used constants. And I can call this account. So as before, the thing that I need to do is to, since I'm testing a requirement, the validation that all accounts should have a name, I expect something to go wrong. So I need to record the exception. plugin with, ensure has contact. And now I will specify which context I want with my plugin. So it has, in the target, it has the account. I'm missing something. And as before, I need to test for the error message. I'll just copy paste it from up there, and then I need to add a new message, no, because oops, select it. Must have name. So I'll just put a message here. Must have a name. And what I will expect from my should have a name is this one. And if I run my test, I will have a failing test. And I'm having a failing test here because my implementation is just throw for each create throw this error. And I'll try to go a little bit faster because I see the time is going on. So what I need to do is to get my target record. So I'll go in the context and I'll get the target. I want it early bound, so I will specify account. And then this is just some shortcut that I implemented with the template, and you can go and see the implementations in the plugin base. But we're not going to talk too much about that. And what I like to do is like this gives you null if it's not populated. So I'll just throw a new invalid execution exception. Now I need to throw some message because the target is missing, but I like to put global messages in another class. So target missing. Now here I can throw the messages. Now that I have my account, I can go ahead and check must have name. So I implemented a new check for my now if I run my test, the failing test should pass. But I'm having another failing test because I didn't specify my context here. So even this one is having a missing name. So what I have to go ahead and create the account and plugin context as before. And here we want to test that it should have a primary contact, so we can fill the name property, and if we run the tests again, I didn't specify the target, so plugin context. And this is where your tests help a lot, no? Because for each thing that you forget to configure, you probably will have something, a test fail or something that helps you remember that you should configure something else. So we fulfilled this, that account should have a name. And for the moment, we have that each account should have a primary contact passing to, but it's not implemented in the right way. I will just implement it so we can go a little bit faster and not write a test about this. And if we have time at the end, I can go ahead and write a test to check about this. So account the primary contact ID, if it is empty, then I will show this error. Now it is implemented in the right way. And what I wanted to do next is to add another feature, another plugin, let's say, to validate. So we validated this one too, and we want to implement to fulfill this requirement too. So when we create an account, we should set the primary contact's parent account. But first, I will go ahead with those other two requirements. I need the ability to greet users on Teams, but I need some custom action. So each citizen developer, the old ones, the ones that create workflows, not the new ones in the flow, but can create a workflow and use a workflow step, let's say a custom workflow action that communicates with Teams. I will not implement that, but I will add a new project. Okay, new project. And I will use the workflow template, and I will just call it Albanian XRM workflows. So now we have another project which is structured in a pretty similar way to our plugins, but here we will implement our workflows. And I have a workflow base which is a lot similar to our plugin base, but it has something more. Now I will create the workflow which I want to call greet user. A real implementation of this should, when used, let's say, and when you pass the ID, external ID in Teams, let's say it, I put a requirement that it should be an integer, even though it isn't. But when used, it should call Teams and greet and tell you if the user was online or not at the moment of the greeting. So I'll do the greet user and I will extend the workflow base. As you can see, this is pretty much similar to my plugin. Now I will add the tests too. Okay, new project, test library. As before, I have to manage the NuGet packages, install FakeXrmEasy. Okay, my internet is not that fast at the moment because I'm sharing. I'm going to install XUnit. So if I go in my, and I need to copy paste the test base in my workflow. And I will rename this to user greeter, greet user, what was the naming convention that I used, greet user. And this will extend the test base. So what test should I do for this? I have two requirements: that the ID must be positive and that I have to greet them. We can test the IDs must be positive. So I'll just write a test for that. Public void user ID. And I need the fact attribute. So I need to execute a workflow. I need the input and outputs of the workflow. So I haven't specified nothing yet. I'll go ahead and specify an in argument of type integer, which I will call user ID. And we'll just leave it like this for the moment. So I'll go back to my test. And I want to specify the inputs for my workflow action. So the inputs in FakeXrmEasy are a dictionary of string object. And I want to specify the user ID that I just created, Nemo. I haven't referenced my project yet. Okay. User ID. Was it not public? If I deployed this, if I had deployed this, it was not public, so it wouldn't have worked, no? So you get some sort of validation with this. So I'll specify it as 0, and I will, I expect an exception. Equals record exception. So what I want to do now is to execute a code activity. Code activity is the greet user, and it requires the inputs to be specified. So I just did that, and I want to assert my exception. I need to add the message to specify so I can validate if it's throwing the right error message. So public const and I will check for that error. I'm going to run my tests. It is not throwing that error because I haven't implemented anything yet. Method or operation not implemented. I can go to my class with user and implement this. So first I need to read the user ID, and I have some extension, let's say in my context, to make it pretty similar to a plugin. So I can write like this, equals context dot arguments dot get value from user ID. And if you're curious, you can go and check my GitHub where this template is on how it works. And I will post the code, the source code of this to GitHub later on, so you can check it there. And I'll add my validation here. No. Use my constant there. So no string literals allowed in this part of the code. And if I run my test, it should pass. So now I'm going ahead and show the test coverage because I see that I'm short on time. So I'm going to add a new dummy project. And you notice that I called it a dummy project because it will have no code in it. I'm going to go ahead and write ms build. This is the package that I have created that does some strange stuff, let's say, with ms build. So it auto configures the output for the input for the report generator, so you can generate the test coverage. Now I installed it. What I can do is I have to add the references to the projects. So I installed the package and reference my test projects in this project, and the package will auto configure the input necessary for report generator. So if I build it, you can see that it's running the unit test with XUnit, and after that it will just write a report which it wrote here, and I'm going to open it on a Chrome window. Okay, sorry. So now, without doing anything, I just installed my package, and then we have the code coverage for our plugins and our workflows. And I see that I'm really short on time. I'm going to have some minutes for questions, so I will turn to my slide and then open Teams to see if there are any questions. Okay. I don't hear if there are any questions. No one's talking. Okay. Example with retrieve.
Jordi, I had some questions, but I think so Jordi covered the
answers.
Yeah. So like, why did you not use unit test or end test project types, and why did you create the project with the class library?
Yeah, it was just to show that it's pretty easy. It's not because when you go with a test template, you get the MS Test framework, no?
Right.
Usually. So I wanted to use XUnit, and I went with the short way, just create a class library and add the necessary NuGets. So I don't know if there are other questions other than the registration of this, because I see there are a lot of registration requests, but and Jordi did a pretty good job in answering everyone. Okay.
Thank you, Betim. Yes, that was a really good demo. That really was. You stepped through it very nice and slow, and you really took your time explaining everything. So that was really good. I know there's some other kind of more advanced scenarios as well. Some more different scenarios that could also be covered.
Mentioned in the beginning, no, there are like more than 1800 tests in FakeXrmEasy in the repository that validate what the framework does. So you can go ahead and look into those, because there are pretty much everything that FakeXrmEasy offers is unit tested with FakeXrmEasy.
Excellent. And there will be a session later to follow up on that with Jordi as well, isn't there? Yeah, excellent.
Yes.
So I think one of the things that Jordi's also going to share is some of the different test samples and repos that he has available for those different scenarios. Would you agree?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, excellent. Look, Betim, that was really good. That's especially good for those who are just getting used to getting started as well with the unit test. That's exactly what the community needed. So once again, thank you, Betim.
Yeah, that was really my main idea, no, to show that it's pretty simple to start.
Excellent, Betim. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank you.